Hospital Porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV and welcome to this rather wet and dismal Valentine's Day evening. Yes, St. Valentine's Day. I hope no one gets massacred. Yeah, it is Valentine's Day, or Lupercalia, which is a tradition dating back to the Roman Empire where you love and fertility and things like that, and also the tradition of sending an anonymous gift to someone you secretly favour. But maybe that's the reason, I think it is the reason actually why I'm doing what I'm doing tonight. Even though I'm a single guy, I'm still going to celebrate it. And the way I'm going to celebrate it, well, I think I'd have done this anyway. I'm going to go and watch a film in the cinema. I'm going back to the Ultimate Picture Palace, which is where I saw It's a Wonderful Life over Christmas, if you'll recall. I'm going to go and see another film, an old film, not as old, it's about 20 years old, just over 20 years old, and it's called Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, you've heard of it, haven't you? In fact, it's almost a go-to experience or part of the cinematic conspiratorial canon, and I think they're showing it because it's Valentine's Day, just a one-off. I don't know really what the connection is, except of course Eyes Wide Shut is something of a psychosexual type of film. And of course you think to yourself, I know what you're going to say. I mean, people said this when I went to see It's a Wonderful Life. Why, Ben? Why? Haven't you seen it before? Yes. Yes, everyone's seen it. It's, you know, it's a very old film. People talk about it. You've talked about it loads of times in your videos, in your articles, and your radio shows. Yes, true. I have. I've never seen it in the cinema before, though, and as with It's a Wonderful Life, when you see something on the big screen, it's different. That's why cinemas still survive in this day and age, where after the invention of the television set, everyone thought, well, that's it for the cinemas. They still endure to this day for that reason. I've never seen it before on the big screen, and I want to. And who knows, you know, I might pick up something about it that I haven't noticed before, because I'm seeing it in the cinema. Which is, so I'm going to go and see it, and I'm hoping you'll see me. It's raining pretty heavily, I'm afraid. So that's why I'm going to see it. And of course, as you know, I think spoilers are a bit redundant, really, aren't they? Because, as I say, if you're watching her Panwo TV, you've probably seen Eyes Wide Shut. Famous film, Stanley Kubrick's last movie, and when I mean last, he died 6 days after it was released. There's some suspicious elements about that, I think, quite frankly. Yeah, but it's of course about a guy who... It's about a man who is suffering from... he has an argument with his wife, and he feels... Basically, she tries to make him feel inadequate, sexually inadequate in this argument, and so he goes off the rails a little bit, and he ends up in a sort of Masonic orgy type thing. And there's, you know, well, I won't tell you I'll tell you more afterwards, because of course I'm going to make notes, although of course I know the film so well, I've seen it so many times. But it's an interesting movie for many reasons, and it makes you wonder what Kubrick knew and how much he knew, and perhaps that the answer to that might lead to why he died so quickly and suddenly after the film's released. There's lots of unusual things about this film. Firstly, it is actually based on a novel. It's based on a novel written in the 1920s by Arthur Schnitzler, a little novel called Dream Story, which is set, with the plot quite similar, but it's set in Vienna in the sort of beginning of the 20th century. Kubrick, of course, changes the setting. He moves it forward a century in time and across the Atlantic to New York. But apart from that, it's very, very similar in plot. There's all sorts of weird things about it. Firstly, there were no previews. Now, this is very unusual. Whenever a new film is made, before it goes on to general release, it's always shown privately to people from the press, like film critics. They have special private screenings, so that the critics can then go and write up their reviews. So The Guardian and all these other people, it can go straight out to press when the film is put on the general release, when everyone else gets to see it. This didn't happen with Eyes Wide Shut. The reels were sent out to the cinema, so it was put straight onto general release. No previews at all. Secondly, have you ever seen a widescreen version of Eyes Wide Shut? Because when I bought the DVD, I was disappointed to see it was in TV aspect ratio, so, you know, just like a short screen, 4:3 or whatever. And so I endeavoured to go and try and find a widescreen, because I much prefer widescreen movies. There is none. It was shot in TV aspect ratio. Very strange. That's also that's very unusual for film. It's one of the many anomalies to do with this film. It was item notes here. Also, it's of course set in New York. New York, but none of it's filmed. Very little is filmed in New York. There's a few sort of like there's a few sort of like atmosphere shots and sort of background. This is where it is kind of shots that were filmed in New York by a second unit. But Kubrick himself filmed, like he did with almost all his movies from about the mid-60s onwards, filmed Eyes Wide Shut at Pinewood Studios in London, and in London itself in the streets. So the New York street scenes, it's actually London, and they've put in all the signs and the different road signs and things like that and painted the road differently to make it look like New York. He says it's an idea he was working on since he finished 2001 in 1968, so the film has been a long time in producing, from when Kubrick read the book and got the idea to when it actually was made. It was filmed over 400 days, which is the longest continuous production period for any movie. It's never been done before, and there could be several reasons for that. I'm raising my voice because I'm on Cowley Road now, but it was filmed in enormous secrecy as well. The scripts were sort of handed out by special delivery, and security guards and the cast, which includes Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Sidney Pollack, they had to sign non-disclosure agreements and things like this. They weren't allowed to take the scripts home with them and rehearse at home and things like that. It was very much a lot of secrecy, all kinds of things like that. Very weird. And I'll say more at the end, but I do think that maybe Kubrick was trying to create a piece of allegorical fiction in the same way I did with the Roswell trilogy. Yeah, it's, of course, from what we've learned so far, and there's some other disturbing elements I've only just noticed about the film, which I will talk about later, but from what we've learned about Hollywood and how it works and the things that go on there, it just makes me think that he was trying to say something without saying it too obviously. Which, as you know, I've talked about fictional allegory, which is why I write it. You can tell an awful lot that way. You can say an awful lot you couldn't say otherwise. If George Orwell had written a book called, you know, all about the New World Order and stuff like that, people would have laughed him off as a conspiracy theorist, the 1950s David Icke. But instead he wrote 1984, an allegorical fictional novel. It became a classic of literature. Oh, we're nearly at the cinema now, I'm a bit early. But I thought I'd get there and hang around, maybe get a good seat, see how it goes. But it's the Ultimate Picture Palace again, which is like a little small kind of art house flick place, which I've only been there twice with you guys, I think. The last time I think was, the last time was It's a Wonderful Life, and apart from that, I've not been to this one with you guys, so second time, but I have been here before I started doing Hapamo TV actually. I went here to watch Loose Change. There was a special screening of Loose Change years ago, sort of in the mid-2000s, when I was active in the local branch of the 9/11 Truth Movement. Yep, and there it is. So I'll see you later. I'm in the toilet here at the Ultimate Picture Palace. It's actually quite nice. It's sort of got this Art Deco feel to it. And I just thought I'd mention I'm wearing I'm wearing quite an appropriate t-shirt, I think, there. Don't mention the reptilians. I forgot to mention that because I think I put that on specially to go and watch this film. Okay, I've come out of the cinema. I have seen Eyes Wide Shut on the big screen. That is the probably the only chance I'm ever going to get to see that film in the cinema. And I can say I've seen Eyes Wide Shut. Not just seen it, I've seen it in the cinema. And of course, as I explained, seeing things in the cinema is totally different to seeing them in any other way. Oh, and I'm just going to go down here because it's a bit quieter. But got some notes here. Yeah, I mean, it's what can I say? I mean, I did notice. You do notice new things. I mean, every time you see something. I mean, at least I speak for myself. Every time, you know, there's new things to be seen, new things to learn from it. No matter how many times you saw it. And I think, as I said, because the big screen experience is so much different from the usual thing you get from the usual cinematic, the usual, which is watching things on a small screen on TV, that I think I was bound to see the film slightly differently, and indeed I did. But it is essentially a psychosexual drama. That's what it is in its essence. And indeed, it's possible to watch it and just see it that way, and just not really read anything more into it. But of course, that would be to underestimate Stanley Kubrick, and indeed the way the world is. I mean, you'd have to be quite naive, I think, not to think there's more to it than that. That Kubrick made this film for no other reason than just to adapt this book that he read in 1968 and thought, oh, I'll make a movie out of that one day. What it reveals, one of the amusing things, I mean, of course, it is extremely erotic. It's designed to be. In the very first shot, you see Nicole Kidman standing in front of a mirror and taking her dress off, and you just see her completely naked from behind. I mean, you don't see her naked from the front. You see a lot of other women naked from the front, but not her. To be honest, I don't fancy her much, particularly. I don't fancy Nicole Kidman, so that's not much of an attraction for me, I must say. I dislike her character as well, I have to say. I dislike her character. But what's fascinating is, like, the Bill, the main character Bill, the way his world is completely transformed by the experiences he has in it. Oh, I'm just going past the Port Mahon pub. There's always some music in here. Lovely pub this, actually, if you're ever in Oxford. Yeah, nice. There's always music in that pub there. There's always loads of music in there. It's a great pub, that. I'm on a busy road now, trying to find somewhere quieter. But as I said, Bill, his experience is absolutely transformed. I mean, he completely changes as a character. I mean, he totally changes. I mean, at the beginning, he's just really smug little squid. He really is. I mean, he thinks he's such a bloody big shot. I mean, the very first line of the film, in the second shot, it's hang on, it's bloody noisy here. It's still raining. Hang on, get somewhere quieter. Go down here. I'm going a rather long way round because it's home, because I need to find somewhere quiet to film. There's not many places. But Bill thinks he's such a big shot. I mean, you know, the first thing he says, the first line of the film, he's sort of strutting around looking very posh in his tux, ready to go to this party, and he says, "Honey, where's my wallet? Where's my wallet?" Oh God, he's a doctor. He's like a big time, and he's obviously like a specialist GP type person. I mean, he's not like your hospital house officer. He wouldn't be doing on calls at 1/3 rates, anything like that. He's like an old Harley Street type person. This is in New York City, so whatever the equivalent of Harley Street is in New York, he's it. And he thinks he's it. And he goes off to this party, and with this character Ziegler, this Victor Ziegler, who's plays an important role in this particular movie. There's no equivalent to Ziegler actually in the book, which is interesting. But No, I haven't actually read the book, but that's just what I heard. I just hope the camera doesn't pack up because it's bloody wet. If it does, I'll have to film all this again. I'll try and find somewhere dry. But they go in there. I mean, they go into this big posh party, and she says, "Do you know anyone?" I mean, it's the first thing. Bill and Alice walk in, and Alice says, "Oh, do you know anyone here?" And he says, "No." And he says, "What are we doing here?" "Oh, I make house calls." And so Ziegler's one of his patients. And so Bill doesn't know anyone, but then firstly, there's this really quite sinister scene where, well, both of them are flirting with other people. I mean, Alice is dancing with this guy Savos, who's this Hungarian guy, and sort of handsome, very charming, sort of a slick-haired kind of 50-something bloke, you know, obviously well off. And Bill is being led away by these two younger women, posh models, and they say, "Oh, you don't know where." They say, "Well, where are we going, ladies?" And he says, "Where the rainbow ends." And they sort of like they have this knowing look between each other, like they're taking him somewhere. And he's sort of being led along, you know. He's been sort of dick-napped by these two girls, you know, because he's. Unfortunately, some blokes, it's his vanity. The problem is when a man is, as I say, he thinks he's some kind of big shot, and when two younger women come onto him, he's like, he just can't resist, you know, because it feeds his ego. And so, "We're going where the rainbow ends." And then Ziegler's servant comes up and says, "Look, can you come and help me, Mr. Ziegler? I need your help." And then he walks away, and the girls sort of give each other a crafty smile, a knowing smile. And that's so you know something's wrong there. You just know it. And it turns out that there's this woman lying naked in his bathroom, and it turns out she's a prostitute, and he's been shagging her. And obviously his wife's staying. He's a married man, quite an old guy. And you think, like, what's going on? And it's like he seems to just do it normally. It's almost like, oh, you know, it's like you're a mechanic, my washing machine's broken down or something. He's completely heartless with her. He doesn't give a damn about, "Oh, can't you get her out of here?" And Bill says, no, you need to just keep here for a little bit longer. And he's, oh God, he's like, oh God. No one thinks about calling an ambulance. He doesn't think about calling an ambulance, this woman, who's like, she's been taking drugs and overdosed while she's in the middle of shagging him. And you just know it's like, she's really touched by Bill's kindness, I think, to her, because he's really nice to her. He suggests she has rehabilitation for her drugs and addiction and stuff like that. And she's really touched by his kindness, you can tell, because she comes back in the film later. But you know, this party's almost like, obviously later on there's the orgy scene, and it's just hinted that the people who are at that party are the same people who are at the orgy. Later on, there's these two different events. You just sense it. And the title, Eyes Wide Shut, what does it mean? What does Eyes Wide Shut mean? It sounds like a contradiction. It just sounds like a contradiction. Where am I now? Alice is, you find out in the first segment in this party scene, Alice is a heavy drinker. She drinks, she's knocking back glass after glass. She goes to the toilet. I mean, the first scene she's actually sitting on the bloody bog, and later on she says, "Honey, I have to go to the bathroom," which indicates she's like drinking a lot. Yeah, there's it's weird. It's a weird thing. There's some weird like symbolism. I mean, like, it's just weird. Like Ziegler has this in this bathroom where he's got this bird, this prostitute, this woman who comes back in the film later. He's got a painting on his wall that looks exactly like her, which is weird. And there's this. I'm interested in the colour tones they use, because the principal colours in the film are black and blue. I mean, most of the scenes are at night, so it has a bit of a filmy noir type feel to it, like Blade Runner. And there's blue. I mean, there's blue in the indoor scenes. Blue light is coming in through the window. You know, blue light just seeping in from the street. And And like, when Bill's at the party, when Bill's at the orgy, he's wearing a black cape, but when he's in the light, it looks blue. It looks blue. And there's Christmas trees everywhere. That's interesting. Every single scene has a Christmas tree, which is what you'd expect, because it is like, it's set in the pre-Christmas period, in the run up to Christmas. Indeed, there's all kinds of other things connected to that. But when you go, what's interesting is, hang on, my notes, my paper I've written my notes on is sort of slopping away in the rain. Hang on. So that's 1, 2, page 3. I'm just writing on an envelope here. I've literally written this on the back of an envelope. Where am I now? Excuse me one moment, ladies and gentlemen. And then they go home, and it's like, it's quite interesting actually, because there's a lot of this psychosexual tension, you know. You see Bill, he's examining a naked woman in his surgery, you know, which is what doctors do, of course, you know. I've seen that done a few times, and it's just a normal part of the job, you know. You just get on with it. But he's like, he thinks he's this like big. He's a professional man, you know. He adheres to the ethics of his profession. I think he feels a bit guilty when he sort of oversteps the mark, like when he wakes the guy up to get a costume or something. But then there's this amazing scene where Bill and Alice, but Bill's wife is Alice, Nicole Kidman's character. Bill is played by Tom Cruise, of course. There's this amazing scene where they're stoned. I mean, they do it quite well, because obviously you can't really get stoned on a film set, but they act like they're really stoned. I mean, they speak very slowly. Alice especially is like, did you happen to fuck them? Things like that, you know. And indeed, generally the dialogue in this film is like quite slow. It's delivered slowly. There's gaps between the speeches and things like that in all the scenes in this film. But Alice is stoned, and she confronts him about his flirting when he's led off with these two women, and Alice thinks that Bill has gone off to like shag them, and Bill has not. Bill's gone off obviously to save the life of this poor young woman who Ziegler doesn't give a shit about. This prostitute he's hired. I mean, what's interesting is like, see, Bill and one of the reasons maybe they do this so well is the actor and actress, Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman. They used to be married. They were married before they did this movie, so they weren't. I think they'd split up by the time the film was made. But it may indicate something about the way they can act so well together. And then there's another example. That is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is quite similar in some ways, because it's like there's no violence or anything in it, but it's like a dialogue, and it's like watching a fencing match with words. It's got Richard Burton and Catherine. What's her name? What's the name of that woman? His wife, Richard Burton, and the woman he married twice, famous actress. You'll come to me in a minute. Elizabeth Taylor, yeah. And it's like that. They again, brilliant acting, brilliant dialogue. They really fit in with it, and so they're stoned, and then Alice tells Bill about a fantasy she had. Like, well, it wasn't a fantasy. She didn't even meet him. She said there was a young naval officer at the hotel where they were when they were on holiday, but just a few months earlier. And she didn't meet him, but he looked at her and she could barely move. And she said, if you wanted me just for one night, I'll give up everything, you know. And that drives Bill nuts. I mean, like, really, really nuts. This is the impetus which leads him to everything else that happens in the film comes from this moment. And there's a nasty bit of feminist. There's a nasty feminist angle to this, because she says, "Oh, if you men only knew what we women really feel," and things. Oh God, I hate that kind of shit. But I mean, Bill walks into it because he's stoned as well, and he says, "Well, women aren't like that, you know." And I mean, they didn't use the term mansplaining didn't exist back then. It was 20 years ago, but that's basically what he was doing. And he should have just said, "Oh yeah." He said, he should have just gone along with it and said, "Oh, I don't know, you know, maybe she did, maybe these women did fancy me, you know, I don't know." He tries to claim they didn't because they're women. I mean, I talked this over with other people while I've watched this movie, and we wondered, obviously, if Alice just made this story up. You know, but it's incredibly dramatic the way she tells him and his response, because he looks utterly horrified. I'm trying to stop the camera getting too wet. She looks utterly horrified. He looks utterly horrified the way she went after she told him. But then other things happen. He goes. Then someone phones up to says that one of his patients has died, and Mr. Nathanson has died. So she goes to see him. His daughter's there, who's this very pretty young woman, very prim and proper, very pretty young lady with a kind of continental accent, like she's from France or Germany or somewhere. And she announces that she's basically obsessed with him. It's like she has this infatuation with Bill the way Alice had this infatuation with this stranger she met at this hotel. And it gets really more complicated, and Bill's really confused, and then he's attacked on the streets by these men who think he's gay. In the book it was like he's Jewish. The main character's Jewish, but in this book, in the film, it's like they make out he's gay, and this bunch of drunk idiots attack him and taunt him, which humiliates him even more. It's emasculation, you see. That's what it's all about. And so he ends up. He meets up with this prostitute, or she approaches him. It's almost like it's like an energetic thing. It's almost like she pulls. These things happen, you know. These experiences, like this has happened to me. You know, where you're in a certain mindset, certain things come your way. And I don't go along with the whole The Secret. You know, you make your own reality, cosmic ordering system type of thing. I don't go along with it 100%, but there is some reality behind it. In that, a state of mind can pull in certain experiences. I mean, I understand Slaxer is very critical of this whole thing, and I understand that. I understand why he's critical, and he's partly right, but there is an element to that you're in a certain mindset, you're angry, sad, feeling humiliated, you draw in experiences, you attract certain experiences which make it worse, and this has happened to me. This happened to me. I think I talked about the time where I got angry and I poured a can of lager over my friend's head. And I walked off in a huff, and literally less than a minute later someone came up and punched me in the face. It was really weird. But he ends up with this prostitute called Domino, which is an interesting name, Domino. It's a rare name. I've never heard of a woman called Domino, actually. But because Domino's like black and white, and she wears this black and white fur coat. And I don't know what that symbolises exactly, but later on it turns out she's got a sexually transmitted disease, and oh, that's a weird scene. Because later on, I'll come to that, I'll do that now, he goes back to her flat to give her a Christmas present, and she's like not there, and there's this other woman, her flatmate's there, and Bill like tries it on with her, and it's like, he's still eating himself up over everything. He's still like, he wants almost like to prove himself. And also, he's angry with his wife. But then, she's got a sexually transmitted disease. And he thinks, obviously he's thinking, thank goodness I didn't do it with her. At least unprotected, I don't know if he'd do that. But he's a doctor, he should know better. But anyway, he gives her money anyway. He's nice to her, he pays her anyway. He pays her 150. I mean, I worked out, right, he actually, in the course of this film, this big shot doctor who says, where's my wallet, at the beginning, he spent over 850 quid on his adventures in various different ways. Taxi fares, costumes, I mean, $8, not quids, but he spends over $850 on various things. That's another way, I think, like he overpays the taxi driver and things like that. The taxi driver says, that's $80, he says, here's 100. Or something like that. You know, it's overpay. It's like he wants to prove himself. And with men, you know, it is got a lot to do with money. You know, status is tied up with money with us guys. Very much so. But anyway, he ends up with this guy, Nick Nightingale, an old friend of his, who plays the piano at this ritual. They meet up together, and he tells him about this strange event, which he has to play the piano blindfolded. And Tom Cruise, feeling adventurous and feeling like I say, he's in this mood. He's in this wild mood because of his feelings. Says, "There's no way you're leaving unless you take me with you." And then Nightingale gives him the address and everything, and then Bill goes to Rainbow Fashions, which is this costume shop run by a guy called Mr. Milic. Now he's got an Eastern European type, and the actor who plays him, I can't remember the name of the actor, but he's quite well known. He often plays bad guys, and he has this kind of Eastern European accent, you know. "Yes, doctor, what can I do for you?" and that kind of thing. And during the course, while he's getting this, of course, this is one of the most sinister aspects of the film. While he's in the middle of getting this costume, he discovers that, well, first of all, Milic comes across these two Japanese businessmen who are like trying on costumes and things like that, acting really weird. And there's his daughter there who's just wearing bra and panties. And she must be 14 years old if she's a day. And he calls her a little whore and tells her to go away and stuff like that. And later in the film, you find out that he's actually pimping her. And he actually offers in the second scene where Bill goes back to the costume shop, he tries to prostitute his own daughter to Bill. "It needn't be a costume," that famous line. And that's one of the most sinister aspects of the whole thing, I think. Where are we now? Okay, just going to turn the page over. This sort of sloppy thing here. And then he goes to this party. This party's out of town, outside New York City, in this little country area. It's like an old-fashioned, it's like a European-style stately home. In fact, it's filmed at in Britain, like all of Kubrick's films. It's filmed in Britain. As I said, there's a few exterior sort of like setup shots which were done by a second unit in New York and the surrounding area. But Kubrick did everything in London. He did everything I have to go down here actually because I need to get home. He did everything in London and at Pinewood in Hertfordshire, the studios. And of course that's where, I'm going to go under here for a minute, it's a bit drier. Can you see me alright? Yes, this camera's going to stop working, it's going to bugger it up if it gets any wetter. And then of course he says the password, Fidelio. It's quite good actually, I look quite sinister with the sunlight going through and this tree above me, isn't it? It's quite appropriate for the bit I'm going to talk about now, because of course this is the Masonic Illuminati ritual, which of course you don't hardly need describing. But what's interesting, I'll go through some things that you might not have noticed. For instance, as I said, there's a Christmas tree in every scene, a decorated Christmas tree with lights and ribbons and streamers and tinsel on it. And then there's these like shrubberies outside the door of the stately home, Somerton, and they're the same, but they have no decorations on and no lights. It's like there's these heepies or these like shrubs, bushes, and they're shaped, look like Christmas trees, cone shaped, but there's no lights on them. And it's funny because when Bill gets back, he switches off the lights on his Christmas tree. It's really, I don't know if that symbolises something, but of course then you have the masked acolytes, and then there's the ritual carried out by some kind of satanic priest who's dressed as a cardinal. And a lot of black magic ritual is like a parody of Christianity. And he's got a thurible which is giving off incense, and of course there's these women, I think there are 12 of them around him, and again that symbolises the 12 surrounding him, again that's satanic. And they kiss each other in a circle, they do this. He must have done his research because they go anti-clockwise, like they exchange kisses, and then they're completely naked apart from thongs, and later on they take off the thongs as well. And there's a guy with a tricorn hat who sort of like goes like nods at Bill. Now Bill, even though everyone's masked and caped, for some reason Bill stands out. They must have some way of recognising each other, and indeed this man sort of like nods his head as to say hello. Of course everyone keeps wondering who these people are. Is that Ziegler? I mean, there's a woman standing next to him with a feminine mask and a tear drop on the cheek, and I sometimes think that might be Nathanson's daughter, Marion. Or maybe that's Carl, Marion's boyfriend, you know, in the tricorn hat. You hear music in the background, which of course it's with backwards speech. Now again, the backwards speech is a part of satanic ritual. I mean, you know about Joan Baez and her song "Play Me Backwards," and I mean, there's a video on YouTube where someone has reversed it, so you can find out what is actually being said, and it is actually a monastic chant in Romanian. So I can't understand it, I can't speak Romanian, but it's interesting that the Romanian may be a connection to Transylvania and Dracula. It's hard to say. And so somehow Bill stands out. People know, indeed, the woman, Mandy, this woman, who is the woman at the party who, Ziegler, the woman who overdosed, she's like the high priestess of this coven. And she like goes up to Bill and she says, "You don't belong here." She knows. I think she knows who he is. Somehow she knows who he is. She recognises him. And so Bill is then confronted by the acolyte and the high priest, and that's when everything turns blue, like his black cape turns blue as he steps into the light, which I think is very symbolic. And I mean, before that, of course, the orgy scene is like, it's like that film Caligula. I don't know if you've seen it. If you do, it's bloody racy stuff, I'll tell you. I bet it's been banned in a few places, but it's like Caligula, and you hear this music which sounds Middle Eastern, as if it's like a harem sort of thing. And then of course you have Mandy, this high priestess, offers to give her life up in exchange for his, because they like saying, oh, Bill is basically shitting himself. I mean, again, he thinks he's some kind of big shot. He's standing there like a frightened little boy, holding his mask in front of him as if like in a defensive posture. I mean, who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be scared? Because the cardinal says, get undressed. Get undressed. And get undressed? Take your clothes off. Or would you like us to do it for you? And of course, you can use your imagination and you can just think what they're planning on doing to him. God knows. I mean, he's suffering an awful fate. And then this woman offers. She says, "Take me, I'll redeem him." And it's like she takes on his sin. It's almost like messianic. She takes on the sin of the sinner, like Jesus. And she's led away by this person who's dressed like a plague doctor with a big long beak on his face. Very sinister, that. And it could be a bit like Thoth. I mean, Thoth was an Egyptian god of wisdom, though, who had a head like an ibis, which is a wading bird, and had with a big long beak which droops downwards. So some people say it's a plague doctor, some people say it's Thoth. I think it's more likely to be a plague doctor, because Thoth is a positive thing. And then he goes back, and he goes home, and Alice says she's had a dream where, I mean, Alice is deeply ashamed of her. I mean, she comes across as a much nicer person at that point, because she's deeply ashamed of the way she humiliated her husband. And she said she had a dream, and it's obviously a guilt dream, where she dreams she's like being unfaithful to him in front of him and laughing at him and things like that. And then so Bill starts looking around, and he starts investigating, and he's threatened again because he goes back to the house and there's this weird bald guy, and all the bad guys tend to be bald, like the servants are bald in the house. And when Bill is with Milich, in the first scene with Milich at the costume shop, Milich complains. Milich wants Bill to look at his head because he says he's losing his hair, and Bill says, "No, you need a hair specialist," and tells him to get a move on. So indeed, Bill turns up late before maybe that's how they recognise him. He turns up late, and then he finds out first of all that Amanda, this woman, is dead. She apparently died of a drug overdose. The door's locked from the inside. The police are happy, but it seems like a bit of an odd coincidence, doesn't it? Then he finds out that his friend Nick Nightingale, the pianist, has basically been roughed up and kicked out of town. He finds out from this hotel where there's a very amusing character who's only in that scene, and he's the receptionist, and he's played by the actor, I don't know what his name is, but he played a James Bond bad guy once, and he's really funny because he's obviously gay and he's flirting with Bill, and it's like, you've got to say, Stanley Kubrick does have a sense of humour, you must admit it. I mean, he does. And it comes out in probably all his films in one form or another. Sometimes very explicitly in what you could call black comedies that he does, like Dr. Strangelove and Full Metal Jacket. But I mean, this was quite a humorous scene in Eyes Wide Shut, and he does it quite well. And then he gets a call. Then he gets a call from Ziegler, and Ziegler tells him everything. And Ziegler was there. I mean, maybe he's the guy in the tricorn hat. We don't know. We don't know. But Ziegler tells him, and it's interesting that Ziegler then he puts down Mandy's death to coincidence, and he also says that Nick Nightingale wasn't hurt. He was just disgraced and sent home. He's put on a plane and sent home. And he said that Bill's just putting 2 and 2 together and making 5. It's just a coincidence, etc., etc. You know. But of course, Ziegler's. I get the feeling he's lying, and I think we're meant to believe. We know he's a dishonest man. We know he's heartless. He doesn't care about people. We know he's a very sinister character. And one thing he says about is very revealing. And this is where it comes in with Kubrick, because what Kubrick knew behind the scenes, because he said, who do you think those people were at the house? They weren't ordinary people. If I was to tell you their names, and I'm not going to, I don't think you'd sleep so well at night. This means, of course, that the names of these people who were at this satanic ritual were names that Bill would recognise. Famous names. Politicians, actors, producers, movie producers, millionaires. That's what Kubrick's trying to tell us. He's trying to tell us that that's what's going on. And then Bill goes home, and he loses the mask, and it's a bit weird. And of course he just says, "Oh, put it on the bill," he says to Millich. And then he goes home and he finds Alice asleep in bed, and the mask is lying on the pillow. And I'm sure there's some kind of symbolism behind that to do with what is really going on, you know. It's like it's his fake self or something. Alice has been left with his false self, or Alice has been exposed to the monster he's become because of this argument they had. I mean, the row they have over it's just the source of everything. And it comes down to they've both been flirting with other people, and they get stoned and they have a silly argument. Alice tells him this thing which may or may not be true, but she wants to hurt him, and he wants to hurt her. He wants to get his own back, and he doesn't just do it in his mind with dreams. He tries to do it in real life. So Bill and Alice they kind of have a reconciliation. Bill breaks down and cries, and he says, "I'll tell you everything." And the next scene, you see Alice. It's the morning, and Alice is like crying. He has told her everything. And then the final scene in the toy shop, which is generally regarded as an epilogue to the story, but I think it's probably the most upsetting and worrying scene of all, because you see they go to the toy shop with their daughter Helena, and you know, Alice says Helena expects she'll be up in a minute. She expects us to take her Christmas shopping in this toy shop, and she looks at teddy bears and dolls and things, and then you see her wandering off, this 7-year-old girl, and the man in front of her, there's a man in front of her who's leading her away. And I swear blind, it's one of the servants from the ritual, he's got the bald head, sort of red head, sort of balding, sort of gingery hair. I swear it's one of the servants. I swear it's the guy who comes up to Bill and says, "Excuse me, sir, are you the man with the taxi waiting for him?" I'm sure it's that same guy. And this is Kubrick putting this in. It's very, very subtle. It's very easy to miss. I didn't see it until I think not this time I saw it, but the time before. And indeed, I discussed it with the crafty nihilist at Freud. This is Kubrick saying children are involved, and what's more, he's saying something about Bill and Alice. And this is a part of the film which I think is left unsaid. It's something that's hinted at, and there's something that's happened off stage, so to speak. Some arrangement has been made off stage. This is what it could mean, that Bill and Alice have been recruited. Following Bill's escapade there, they've decided to recruit him. They've approached him. Of course, this isn't part of the story. As I said, it's off stage. It's just something that's happened which is outside the storyline. And they're now a part of the organisation, this order, this satanic order. And as what happens with everyone who joins these orders, if they have children, the children are led away by the people who are part of the order. It's a very short, very brief moment, but the camera focuses for a moment on Helena, and she's walking away from them in this toy shop, and the man in front of her is a bald guy, I'm sure. Is appeared in the film earlier as this servant type person. He may have been the guy also who turns up in the Rolls Royce when Bill goes back in the morning, who turns up in the Rolls Royce and hands Bill the letter which warns him again. It may be him as well. You see him from the front there, you see him from behind, and he's wearing a you see him from behind in the toy shop, and you see him with the mask on at the party. I'm sure I think it's the same guy. And that says it all, really, doesn't it? That's what Stanley Kubrick wanted to tell us about what was going on in the elite circles that he knew about. Just like he wanted to tell us what was going on, possibly he wanted to hint what was going on with the moon landing and Apollo, with The Shining and with 2001. And he did it, and he died. Well, what's happened since then? We found out about Jimmy Savile. It's all coming out now since 2016. The 2016 Effect is bringing it out 20 years after this film, or 16 years after this film was made. It's coming out. Now, we know about Jimmy Savile, we know about Jeffrey Epstein, we know about the Corey Feldman and Elijah Wood, what they've been talking about. It's starting, the dam is breaking. It's taken a long time, far, far too long. And when the dam finally bursts, as I said, you are going to see people weeping in the streets when the full scale of what's been done to people, especially what's been done to children, finally emerges. But it has to come out, we have to address it, we have to integrate it and heal ourselves, heal the children and heal the world. Kubrick 20 years ago gave us an almost subconscious message that has gone in to people's minds on a cultural level, and it's now coming out on a open, conscious, material level. He paid the ultimate price, but I'll tell you what, Stanley Kubrick, your courage was not in vain. Thank you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.